I've explained to Lisa that over the past couple of days, we've been talking about the interface between policy and business. And it's really hard to find someone who straddles that more effectively. So it's really fantastic to have you with us, Lisa. I just wanted to start off by asking, what got you interested in the environment in the first place?
Yeah, so I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, very good at math and science. So I was going to be a doctor. And when I was in high school, there weren't enough African-American engineers. And so I got recruited in high school to go to Tulane University for the summer and learn what it meant to be an engineer. I had no idea that there was a thing called engineer. And that kind of started me away from wanting to be a doctor and more to the math and science. I love math side of it. And so I was at Tulane studying engineering, and it was in the early 80s, I'm ashamed to say. Yes, you can do the math. And Love Canal was big in the national conscience. You know, for those of you who don't know, Love Canal, it's a site here in New York State, upstate New York. Sort of a ticking time bomb. It was an old canal and filled with toxic residue, hazardous waste from chemical plants that eventually seeped into the neighboring basements. And I remember thinking that chemical engineers had, which is what I was studying, chemical engineers had been the instrument, the tool to come up with all these processes that resulted in the waste. And it should be chemical engineers that figure out how to clean it up. And from that point on, I was, I guess, an environmental engineer.
So you came to it from not from nature, but from science.
Yeah, I tell people all the time. In fact, up until I got to Apple, I was able to say I had never slept outside. But they were so offended in California upon hearing that they made me go to Big Basin State Park, and I have now slept outside. But I'm not, it was awesome. But it was all about the company, and probably, it was a company, but and it was beautiful. But it wasn't that. I grew up in the city, urban environment. Certainly part of the reason that when I was at EPA, I championed the urban environment as much as the natural, sort of untouched environment, because for many people around the world, that is their environment.
Right. And it's about the people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you were at the EPA especially, but I suppose throughout your career, we tend to have this sense that it's regulation or innovation. They're in conflict. And similarly, yesterday morning, I was already telling you, Felipe Calderon made a very strong case that you don't have to choose between protecting the environment and growth. In fact, the two go hand in hand. So what do you think about that? Regulation, innovation, can they go hand in hand in the same way?
Yeah, having had the honor and thrill of running the EPA, I started at the EPA as a staff level scientist in 1987. And then, in 2009, I became its administrator. So just a huge honor and a rare vantage point to sort of go from working level to understanding the canon of environmental laws in our country. And the best of them, and, they're very old, so kudos to the writers, really look at technological innovation as the trigger for regulation. Right. So if you look at water standards or air standards, they're often keyed by something called best available technology, best practical technology, best available control technology. These are all, arcane terms of art in the regulatory space if you work at the EPA and the air or the water program. But what they're saying to you is you can't require someone to do something that can't be done. And it recognizes the role of regulation to set a floor and also to help commercialization of technologies. Once a technology has been proven, it becomes the floor, it becomes widely adopted, it becomes much cheaper because it's being widely adopted, it becomes a bit commoditized. And when that happens, then the next innovation comes later, usually many years later, and it happens again. And that is truly the history of the best of our Clean Air Act and our Clean Water Act. So I always said you do not have to choose between a clean and healthy environment and a thriving economy. And in fact, everything about this moment we're in is that you can have both. And I think probably it's fair to say not just can have both, but you must have both. If we really want to see sustainable change and we want to see sustainability in every sense of the word, it has to be economically sustainable.
Right.
This is not a charity program we're running.
This is not a charity program.
Absolutely not.
So why did you decide to join Apple?
Easy. Well, it was a combination of many things, but it wasn't, it wasn't the time I chose. It was Tim Cook, my boss, our CEO, who is just an amazing leader, who convinced me to come out and meet the senior team. I had seen the company, obviously, and my kids were its biggest evangelists in our home. I always kid, and it's still true, I think, that the federal government in the U.S. side is a BlackBerry focused world, although it's slowly moving. I know. I happen to know that we've seen several agencies who are moving to the wonderful tools that we make. But, so it was, I knew the company, I understood how sort of important and how much it was just a company that was built around innovation that changed people's lives for the better. But I say that now, and I almost feel like I had no idea, because what I did believe is that, and I strongly still believe, is that business has a role to play here in this transition. It is not, it's not always the one that we're often asked to play, which is to advocate or sign on. What business can do is just do it. We can do it faster. We can demonstrate, as I think Apple has done in numerous ways, and I'd just like to list a few, but that you can do it and still make money and still be focused on your core business, because it becomes part of what you're focused on. So before I joined Apple, the management, the leadership there decided that if we were going to be part of this transition from a bricks and mortar, paper and pencil world to this wonderful digital world, that's great. It's great for resource efficiency. You save, all these studies of how many CDs we don't have to buy and how much paper mail doesn't go anymore. But it wouldn't matter if you were using dirty energy to power all that. So every one of Apple's data centers today is run on 100% renewable, every one around the world. So we have, tens of billions of iMessages a day. We have tens of millions of photos a day. We have, millions of FaceTime video chats. All that is happening without adding to the carbon load in the atmosphere. And that, once you say it, and when people said it couldn't be done, Apple did it. Now everybody can do it, and it's done profitably, and it's done well. It's actually a wonderful deal for the company, because we know where our energy comes from. We know what it's going to cost. We love power purchase agreements when they make sense for us, because they give us a really sure understanding of where prices are going to be and also where our supply is going to be. So we're 100% renewable for every data center, every office, and every store in the United States. Around the world, we're 87% renewable. We just this past week announced a wonderful deal in Singapore that will take our office of over 2,000 people in Singapore to 100% renewable early next year. It's a partnership with a solar developer and the local Economic Development Board of Singapore. They're putting solar panels on public housing in 800 buildings, and we're buying the extra.
So this is building new solar to get your stuff. It's not trying to find existing. Yeah.
So our goal is to, whenever possible, displace brown power, make additional new green power on the grid, and to have very rigorous accounting standards. So those are sort of our three ideas. So we can come in. And oftentimes in the beginning, we're just buying green power if it's available. But our data center in Maiden, North Carolina has a 40 megawatt solar farm and a 10 megawatt biogas fuel cell installation, and we're actually building another. Our data center in Reno has its own solar farm. Our data center in California is solar and wind, and our data center in Oregon was wind, and then this year we added microhydro, which has been a really fun project. One last brag, because I'm so proud of it, is our corporate carbon footprint is not only our facilities.
I was just about to ask, what about your supply chain?
We include our supply chain in our corporate carbon footprint. And as as with most corporate companies today, that means most of the work left to be done to remove our 35 million or so tons of carbon a year that we contribute. That's from the mining all the way through the recycling, all the way through your use. You're an Apple customer. Hopefully some of you are. Every time you turn it on, you're using energy. We calculate that energy. We estimate your carbon footprint, and we own that as well.
Okay.
So it won't be done until we green up your carbon footprint. But where we're going next is our supply chain. We'd like to get that to be 100% renewable. We just announced 2 gigawatts worth of commitment in China. And Foxconn, one of our larger suppliers, just announced their own 400 megawatt solar project in China.
Do you think Apple acting like that brings other people to start thinking like that, or is it really just kind of being out on a limb?
Yes, I think it makes other people have to take notice. Part of the reason you asked me why I went to Apple, and I want to say this with deep humility, because when you leave somewhere like the EPA, the humbling moment is when you realize what you hold in your hand. You're sort of entrusted with making the regulations that will govern the air that people breathe, the water they drink, climate change, the biggest threat of our time. So I wanted to leave there, but I didn't want to go somewhere and feel like I had sort of traded down, I guess. But you're not going to go somewhere and just be sort of EPA administrator somewhere else. But Apple has breadth. And, if Apple makes one change, it can't go unnoticed. And if we change one thing on our device to make it even a bit more energy efficient, it has a huge impact on our footprint, but also on our customers' experience and their energy bill. I don't think there's a way that we can do something that shouldn't be noticed. And I think one of the things that Tim has said, which is really important, is that Apple is known as a company that doesn't like to talk about its product development. Very secretive. We like to roll out a new device and delight you with features you didn't even know we were working on. But he's not that way when it comes to clean energy or our work on toxics or our work on resource efficiency in the circular economy, because those are things that, as he would say, if you want to leave the world better than you find it, you can't just change yourself.
Right.
Changing yourself does not change the world.
Now, at Apple, you started off being environmental director, and then they brought in the policy and the social part as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. That happened. I joined in June of 2013, and about 2 years later, I became. The title went from environmental initiatives to environment, policy, and social initiatives.
What's your advice then, I guess, and what would you say from your experiences about this is the topic of our meeting, and also to a great extent of our projects and our partnership. How can policymakers and influencers work better with business and vice versa? Good question.
I think first, the first rule is be yourself, right? If you're a business person, do business. And if you're a policy person, make enlightened and informed and hopefully policy that is made in a way that involves stakeholders from all over. And I say that not to say that there aren't blurring of lines sometimes, and that there aren't wonderful companies out there who are standing up and taking stands on important social issues and saying, listen, it is bad for business if society goes in a certain way. Tim's been great about that, talking about the intersection of values and business leadership. So I'm not saying that, but I do think that the first thing is to make sure that, as we would say at Apple, your category one is solid. If we're going to be out there advocating and talking about clean energy, we need to be able to demonstrate it. I need to be able to show people all the things we do and follow it up with, and oh, by the way, they're all good for the bottom line. But then, I think what we also need to do is make sure that we have this virtuous cycle going, which is if business is demonstrating something, it has to be able to take a risk. Smaller and mid-sized companies are constantly looking for, especially clean and green companies, are looking to get over that valley of death. So we look hard at Apple. It can be hard the bigger you get to try to find those companies, to try to find those opportunities to take one or two along. Apple's power cords are PVC free because the company went halogen free years ago. And that process meant finding small companies that could actually first come up with the thermoplastic, the elastomers that would meet all the safety and strength requirements and be PVC free, and then could scale to make hundreds of millions of them a year.
But that's working with smaller companies. What about working with policymakers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, policymakers, I think opportunities that bring them together that are outside the classic regulatory sort of push and pull. So we all belong to trade organizations and other assemblages. But I know when I was at the EPA, I won't speak for Gina, one of the best things that could happen is when people came in and actually said, let me bring you my engineers to explain to you how it works. And they didn't often do that with me because they were like, yeah, she's too busy. But they would come in with our air program scientists and engineers, or our water program, and really the deep level of collaboration that takes to, again, go back to that idea of what is the best available technology? Where is it? And how do you, without hurting the economy, bring those along? How do you make CAFE standards, as we did when I was there? When we put the CAFE standards in place, we had people saying, oh my God, 55 miles per gallon on average, but 2025, what are you talking about? We know that whenever you put a technical standard out there, it always gets met early. Always gets met early and cheaper. It's always cheaper because what companies need is, sure, they need the certainty to know that if I go here, you're not going to change the rules on me. And what business, and what policymakers need is the ability to show a judge often or someone that you have these technologies and that they're available. So that's the give and take. I won't tell you that there aren't days when it doesn't hurt to have folks line up and advocate. We're a member of the Ceres Network. We've advocated on how important it is for the world to address climate change and for individual states to really step it up. For us, it's becoming a matter of we don't mind building solar farms, but it's not our core business.
Right.
We'd love to just be able to walk in and say, hey, we want to do something here or there around the world, and the clean energy is already there.
There's a couple of things that you said, and the main thing that I just want to quote back at you, and I will quote again many times, is you don't have to choose between a clean and healthy environment and a thriving economy. And you said it's not just that you can have both, but you must have both. And I think that's probably a key message that we should take away from this meeting as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Lisa. We really appreciate it.